In this episode with Carly Shorter.
I had 2 goals. First one, get an A bursary. Second one, don't miss a party. And I loved it. Like 14 years of hanging out with amazing people, interviewing, rugby stars and celebrities. But everyone had been divorced at least 2 or 3 times. Like, I don't understand. So another rule for Carly, never go out with anyone else in radio.
All right. So, Carly, if I was to meet little Carly,
Mm-hmm.
small Kiwi girl, what kind of character were you as a child?
And let's clarify what little, as in, do we need some kind of, because I don't know, maybe I've changed.
As in a young child,
A young child.
Yeah.
Yep. First word that comes to mind, spirited. What is that?
We'll ask for a definition.
Yeah. Don't know. It was never defined to me, but definitely spirited, happy-go-lucky, energized, vivid imagination. Yeah.
Well, so you're quite sure about that. So tell me a bit more about this vivid imagination.
It's
How
that.
did it manifest itself?
Yeah. No, it is that classic. It's that classic. Had imaginary friends.
Right.
Yeah. Quite early on, there was 2 dogs called Baron and Curly.
Right.
Yeah, they were fierce friends. And I actually had I don't have a sister. I'm the youngest in our family, and I've got an older brother.
Right.
But I had an imaginary sister called Lilith that's a random name. But apparently I would pick up the telephone and ring Lilith.
Right.
When I was upset with Mum telling me to do the dishes and things like that.
So you were about 18 when this was happening?
Yeah, well, that's probably the last phone call. That was the last time I rang, had a chat.
Okay, so
Yeah.
2 dogs and Lilith.
Yes, and then, the good old pretending to be other people. So Sarah the dancer was one persona that I jumped into, and Princess Didda.
Princess Didda.
Yeah, you asked the question, pal. I just answered it.
I'm so pleased I did.
I know. Of all the questions, you went to there.
Yeah.
I've got a few stories of that.
And so how did these characters come about then? What do you think the need was for those?
Obviously dull. There are things. No, things went dull. But I think as the youngest, I actually don't know. I've never even considered. They were just there.
So you've got memories of these, all right?
Have I got memories?
Or
I think I've probably
what you've been told about?
Yeah, probably I do remember being like filthy on Mum a couple of times and then picking up the phone. God knows who I actually rang, but and just like spitting down this. Oh, you won't believe what she's done now, Lilith. So I kind of remember that.
All right.
Yeah, and I don't know, other than Sarah was obviously a dancer.
Yeah.
And Princess Didda, don't know, but she's the one that just probably sounds the most fun.
Is there one of those characters that's a little bit still alive today?
I'd say they all are.
Right.
I don't know about the dancing though. Yeah.
So what did, I don't know which name to pick. Well, we'll go with Carly, right? What did Carly, what was her aspirations as a young child? What did she want to grow up to be?
Oh, famous. famous, full stop. Um, yes, and so much so that it was like Barbie and the Rocker era. A lot of Barbie and the Rocker. So I wanted to be a rock star, and then an actress, but mainly probably the rock star thing. Yeah, famous. Don't know what, but like this was Debbie Gibson era,
Ooh.
early. You knew.
I'm listening to
You
Debbie.
knew.
I'm listening to Debbie in the car a lot lately.
I don't
I
even
don't know
know.
why. It came up and on a Spotify feed or something like that. And ooh, remember this? And then I ended up. I've got several of them in a playlist. Yeah.
That's yep.
Sorry about that. But yeah.
Yeah, Tiffany, Paula Abdul, like a lot of Madonna. I mean, she's huge, wasn't she?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where I got. That looks like fun. Let's do that. Yeah.
So you wanted to be famous.
Yeah, I did.
You wanted to be famous, and so growing up then at home, what was home like? Was there support for being famous?
Oh, that's a good question too. Was there support? It certainly wasn't like discouraged. I think it was more about like that certainly wouldn't be my brother's jam at all. I don't know. I just think I was that kid that just loved to put on a show. I was the one that was probably annoying the bejeebers out of all the adults, going, "Hey, can we do the show?" And like, if any other kids were there, they would have been drawn into the show and some given a prop role. God forbid, not a lead part. Yeah, and then like, let's do this show, and there was no like, I don't know, there's no scripts or anything. We just riffed. We just we just went with it.
Yeah.
And they were so good. Mum and Dad would always, sit down, probably roll their eyes. Sorry, and away a show went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at school, what were you doing that was like, was this a conscious thing that you were doing things towards being famous, or was it just, you know, you thought you wanted to be famous once and then it
Yeah.
panned out the way it panned out?
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? I think that whole primary school era, there's so many opportunities to play and just be with that. And it's not until you get into later years that there are school productions and, real opportunities to throw yourself into that. But I think the older I got, the more serious I got, and that you probably don't want to stick out from your peers a lot. So for me, I think there was always this, and I think I just think about the, age 8. That was maybe 6, 7, 8 is the rock star type of I want to be famous, but then after that, it's this a pull to maybe being well known for something or being really good at something, but I wouldn't have in my teenage years. It wouldn't have been around fame. It was just potentially maybe that's where the being a pretty popular kid, like to be liked, and a bit of fun.
Mm.
So, but then very aware of not standing out in a way that was going to not be cool. I think. Yeah.
So can we talk a bit more about that? Because I was going to come back to that anyway. Because
Yeah.
you've said that twice now about not standing out.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you want to be really famous, rock star, dancer maybe. But on the other hand, as you're getting older, is that something that happens to all of us? That as we get older, we want to blend in more.
Yeah.
You think? Is that why is that?
Yeah, that's, and even my work now, like you see that, and I think I'd describe that like there's a pull that is just a part of your essence that you are drawn to things that you are good at would, so you can hide all you like, but actually that's going to bubble to the top, and that will be it will become prominent in some way, shape, or form. But then there's this a discomfort around what will other people then think, and yeah, how am I going to do that?
And so it's interesting because you and I were talking about Sir Ken Robinson, who I think passed away last year. We were talking about that off camera before we started this, about his book called The Element.
Yeah.
But he's also a big proponent for the fact that schools kind of knock out the creativity out of kids. The school system historically has been based on the needs of the Industrial Revolution or whatever, and it's not necessarily geared up to create more creative people. It knocks it out of us. Is that something you found at school? Wanting to be famous, but then did you feel that there was opportunities at school, or was it kind of the opposite of that?
Yeah, so I grew up, that would have been in the 90s. And were there opportunities? Yeah, there totally was opportunities like drama and things like that. Productions, if you were good with music and instruments, so you'd have that opportunity. But I think it is what sparks in me, my personal experience would have been having a teacher who just kind of you gelled with, that the teacher would then see what really moved you or inspired you. And it would be the encouragement, I think, of those individuals in your life that are like, hey, Carly, have you considered this? Or, hey, I know that you're really good at this. Have you put your hand up for this opportunity? And I think that's probably what more than anything, I think it's probably individuals in my life who have given me.
So have you got an example of that then, that you can remember? That maybe because it's interesting. Another guest talked about their music career, and actually that was started by a teacher creating a connection with a band. If that had never happened, then his whole life would have been different.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Have you got an example where, like you just explained there, is there someone who saw something in you and maybe kind of not steered you but guided you, or give you the option of moving in a certain direction that led somewhere?
Yeah. I didn't even listen to him. It was a PE teacher, because I loved PE, like smashed a good run around. And when you're playing ultimate frisbee, I think that was what we. It's real hard stuff. Yeah, Mr. Watt was my teacher at Nai College, and Mr. Watt was like, I just really loved how the body worked, and I loved. Probably should have done some kind of physiotherapy. I don't know. And he encouraged me. He said, like, you're smashing this. You really should look at physical education, health and science, and go and do double degrees down in Otago. And I went for a radio career.
Right.
I went, great idea. That sounds way too hard. So I followed what I just thought would be a bit more fun.
Yeah. Okay. So you just mentioned you grew up in Nai,
Yeah.
Wellington, and so talk to me a bit more about what was influencing you at that stage and your kind of circles.
Yeah.
That you didn't just go with the advice of someone who's an elder and knows better, but no, I know what I want to do. How did you know what you wanted to do?
Well, I think I did that ebb and flow through school. I was like really engaged in school, and then I was like, ugh, I'm out. I remember getting offered a hairdressing apprenticeship when I was 15. Came home, said to mum and dad, right, that's it. I'm going to leave school and be a hairdresser. I think this was quite a pivotal moment in my life. And my mum said to me, who is a teacher, and dad had his own business, computer engineering. Yeah. And I said, right, I'm going to leave school and be a hairdresser. I've got this opportunity at Green Village here in Lower Hutt. And mum turned around and she said, well, Carly, if that's what you want to do, that's what you really want to do, your father and I fully support you. And I looked at her, disgusted. I slapped my hand down and went, is that all you think I can be? Which is no disrespect to hairdressing. But for someone who'd been working there on a Thursday after school and one Saturday, who didn't really like touching hair, and I'm really pleased that Mum took that moment to maybe do a little bit of reverse psychology.
Yeah.
I think that's a theme in my life. A couple of people have done that for sure. Yeah. And I went, right, that's it.
But I'm interested though, because weren't you kind of maybe practicing reverse psychology? Why were you saying that that's what you were going to do?
I know how slick. Yeah, it's quite insightful, Stevie-O. Yes. I guess I was. Maybe I was testing the water going, yeah, maybe. What does mum and dad say? They're going to nut off, which would have made me gone, see, I am going to do it. That's what I would have done. left school and done hairdressing, which when you don't like standing up, you don't like touching people's hair, probably wasn't a great career choice. And then mum just went, well, what do you want to do? And I said, right, I want to do TV. And so then I went and spent a lot of time at the Avalon TV studios in Lower Hutt and got this awesome behind the scenes view on Crime Watch and Country Calendar.
Right.
And I remember talking to one of the cameramen and he's like, what are you here for? You know, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm really interested in TV. So I hooked up a friend of a friend's parents who were in the industry, and they said, yeah, come and spend the day there, which I did. And there's this cameraman, and he said to me, don't start in TV because you will be making tea and coffee for the next few years. Go back to school, finish off school, and get into radio. He said, get your fundamental media skills in radio and then see if that's what you want to do later on. I went, oh, just because some random cameraman said to me, it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Radio.
Bollocks to the teacher who knew what he was talking about. But
P.E. Schmee. Yeah, didn't follow that. But I did follow radio.
So you did. And so talk us through that journey then. You know, like, oh, sorry, no, I want to go back to actually the reverse psychology on your parents.
Oh, yeah.
So do you think, I don't know, don't take this as any kind of inference, but that's how I work. But do you think that maybe you knew secretly what you wanted to do? The hairdressing thing was saying actually a way for you to agree with what I want is to offer this first and then get their kind of response and then say, well, actually, I'm going to go down this path and get the support for that.
Yeah.
Do you think or not?
Oh, I think there's so much happening in that time of your life, isn't there? That one thing I know about myself is I've been hugely influenced by external forces who have, and at various, not just my parents, not just my mates, my peer groups, different people at different times, and I have put a lot of weight on what other people suggested or thought. Until only these later years where flipped it. But the reverse psychology, definitely. It's like, you tell me I can't, I'll do it. Tell me I can,
don't want to.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the, like the TV and radio thing. It's a bit like, kids who want to be artists or actors and things like that. And a lot of the time you hear or read about, parents putting them off and go get a real job.
Yeah.
That's not my opinion. Far from it. I've got kids who are budding actors and actresses and bloody artists, and I encourage that because as you and I have talked about previously, about being in your element, it's important to find what you love and what you can do. But there is that kind of certain career paths are probably not encouraged because parents don't want you to be disappointed.
Yeah, and I had a lot of mates like that at school where parents were encouraging them. Oh, you have to do this, and you have to do the chemistry, and then you have to do what's that? Oh, yeah, physics. Like, as soon as I could, maths. I don't know. I've never used a linear equation. Have you?
I wouldn't know if I have or haven't.
Nah. So I think, but my mum's very, very smart. Like, mum knew I was only going to do well in things I really enjoy because I am an all in, or I'm like the threads. Like, if you can't bring me in, then I'm pretty much out. So it's either one or the other. So what was pretty cool is I had mates who were like, oh, I have to do this and I have to do that. And mum basically said to me, what subjects are you most excited about? I just, in hindsight, it was an incredibly smart move. Smart woman.
Chip off the old block?
I wish. I hope so. One day. Yeah.
So you got this random cameraman saying, go into radio. So how did you go about that? How did you get into radio?
Well, I had this. There's the other side of me. So I walked away telling mum. So mum, I've decided I'm going to stay at school. I'm going to plug right back into school. I'm going to get right into it because I I don't know what I want to do actually at the end of it, but I don't want to leave and put all my eggs in one basket. So Mum was probably secretly like, woohoo, well done, that's great. Reverse psychology worked again, whatever it was, I don't know. And so I came back and I said, so I do, tell me about this TV, not TV, the radio thing. And so Mum had done some research, bless her, not a researcher. So, and just found out what was available. So either doing a 3-year degree in Christchurch or doing a 6-month intensive training in Tawa, which was, grew up in the Hutt Valley. So Tawa was just over, so that was nice and convenient. And I was like, 3 years, 6 months, let's go with 6 months. And so kind of set my heart on the New Zealand Radio Training School. And so that's where I went after school. But I had to plug in for 2 years and went, right, okay, so if that doesn't work, what will I do? And I actually decided to give school a real go and did really well. So I ended up, I remember at the beginning, I'm probably circling around to another question, but at the beginning of my 7th form, year 13 year, I had 2 goals. First one, get an A bursary. Second one, don't miss a party. Achieve both of those goals.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Which, they kind of work against each other probably a little bit.
How ironic.
Yeah.
How ironic. The paradoxes, right?
Yeah. But you achieved it.
I did. Actually did, and thus been clever, I think, with Mum's encouragement of doing subjects that really light you up. They then led to the humanitarian type of subjects, like your classics, your art history, photography. Oh, photography, so cool. And PE, and then the ones that you have to do. And so then I ended up scholarshiping and got what was called the R.E. Jones Humanitarian Award. So that meant I got some money to put into what I was going to do after school.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thanks.
So the whole radio journey, the 6-month thing, that went obviously well, right? Must have done, because you ended up in radio. So talk to me about that. How did you end up getting into radio? Was that difficult?
Yes, very much so. Yeah. It was funny because, that went well. Actually, the training, I don't mean any disrespect, but basically we were still working on LPs, like records at radio school. And this is, what was that, 1999. So, and splicing tape. So that's like when you cut, you remember cassette tapes?
Yeah.
And you cut it.
No, I don't remember.
You do. You do. And splicing them, and that's how you edited back in the day. I get into radio eventually, and not one record player, no splicing, nothing. Everything's actually digital. So, but we had some great experiences. And it did set my foundations in radio. It was great to get an understanding. And another thing that sticks out is everyone that came to see us, like tutors, so or not just the tutors, but speakers from the industry. People would come and visit, whether they were general managers or breakfast show hosts. So everyone that had seen us, I don't know if it just stuck out, but everyone had been divorced at least 2 or 3 times.
Right.
And it was another kind of like, oh, okay, so another rule for Carly: never go out with anyone else in radio if I'm going to get into radio. And didn't. I think that's probably a great move. Yeah. And what was the other question?
So well,
on a
I was
tangent,
asking about how you got into radio from radio school. But before you do, it's just interesting that you say that. You obviously, even at that early age, you were observing life.
Very much so.
Learning from it. Right?
Yeah.
Because if you said that you were observing that people were getting divorced and actually maybe not find a partner in the same industry, that'll work. Yeah. That's good insight, right?
Well, I guess so, yeah. And having not actually thought about that so much, but yes. Yeah.
Cool. So to go back to my original question.
Yeah.
How did you say, the transition from 6 months at radio school, getting into radio, because not everyone who goes to radio school gets on radio. Not everyone who goes to acting school becomes an actor. Those kind of things. It's like, there's still hurdles to jump over. And for some people, I suppose, by going through that, they realize actually probably not what I want to do. but you weren't put off, clearly.
No, and another reverse psychology thing, one of my tutors at radio school, very well known New Zealand broadcaster, Dick Ware, he used to read kids' stories on radio. And he was our vocal tutor. And anyone who knows Dick Ware, he speaks like this. It's quite. I remember him saying to me afterwards, "So, Carly, you might one day make it as a night announcer." And I was like, let me show you.
Right.
And so I remember going Wellington around 14 different radio stations. It probably wasn't 14 different stations at the time, but different frequencies. And at that point, things were quite far more independent. And just keep going, wherever I don't care what I do, just I need a gig, and really keen to help, really keen to do anything. And everyone kept coming back to me saying, you need experience. I'm like, yep. So this would give me experience if I could get in there. And I think I weaseled my way into Solid Gold FM in Taranaki Street. And the general manager was not a particularly personable man at all, but he said, you happen to come in at the right time because our copywriter is going away for 3 months. And so if she thinks you can do the job, then you can fill in while she's away. Free,
Right.
unpaid.
Okay, it's like an internship type thing.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that did happen. And I started, so copywriting is when you write the ads, you write all the commercials. And it was also production, so I was doing the job of the copywriter and the production engineer. So then you were getting people in to do the voicing, and then you'd make the ad, and the way it goes. And so I remember I went into Tony, the general manager's office. He'd not said like 3 words to me the whole 3 months I was there. I had no idea if I was doing any good or what was. There was kind of like nothing. And I remember I went into kind of like tiptoed my way into Tony's office, knock, and I said, "Hey, Tony, just letting you know, Pip's coming back and in like a couple of weeks, and I was wondering if, you could suggest where do I go from here type thing." He goes, "Sit down." Okay. And he picked up the telephone. He calls another radio station up on the Kapiti Coast, and he said, "Yep, Bill, Tony, I've got a copywriter here. She needs a job. What have you got?" And he gave me a glowing recommendation. And so from there, I ended up doing copywriting at another radio station on the Kapiti Coast, and that's where I started on air on a 10 to 2 show.
Right.
Yeah. And got
10 to 2 as in 10 at night, 2 in the morning?
No, actually,
Not a night show.
like during the day. I know, Dick Ware. So 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So it was awesome. I was kind of like, oh, this could be a thing.
Yeah, making it happen.
Mm.
That's cool, eh? So are you one of these people, Carly, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, that when people infer, they might not necessarily say you can't do something, that kind of motivates you to go do it and prove them wrong?
Yeah, I really am. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's for all the years that I've now been doing personal growth and reflecting on building my own self-awareness and the work that I do, you get these real insights into how you operate. I've probably not put that one together until now. Yeah, definitely. Maybe being seen as the underdog kind of helps me, but
I think you can go one of 2 ways, can't it? So people can say you can't do something and you just believe them.
Yeah.
Or you say, actually, who are you to say I can't do that?
And I think it's got a, so most of the time I probably have just listened, and gone, yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. And because you tell me I can't. Yeah. But I think there's these few moments in my life where there's been I don't know, I'm going to give that one a go.
Yeah.
Or I'll show you. If I really just had this maybe a bit of a distaste for somebody, I think that makes it even more powerful for me.
And I think that's a good thing.
Maybe.
Most of the time, unless it's actually something you're not really wanting to do or maybe shouldn't do.
If you're
You
not
know?
jazzed about it, you
Yeah,
gotta
but
let
like
that go.
sometimes you can feel like the need to prove people wrong anyway.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And then it becomes a bit of a waste of time, I suppose. But I remember as a kid, I had my parents took me to the doctors, and because I think my knees were like I was a bit knock-kneed,
Yeah.
you know, and they wanted to know what's wrong with him, so we took him back. And I remember the doctor saying, "Ah, he's fine. He'll never be a runner, but it's nothing to worry about." And I was just like, as you do when your kids, when your parents take you to the doctors, standing there, kind of a silent witness, just being spoken about.
Yeah.
And I thought, hang on a minute, what do you mean I'll never be a runner? And I wasn't at that point, far from it. But it sowed a seed in my head that actually you're not going to tell me what I can't do.
Wow.
You know,
And how old were you?
I would have been about 11 or 12,
Yeah.
maybe 11. Same age as my youngest daughter now.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, and it just, rightly or wrongly, spurred me to demonstrate that actually you can't just label me as someone who can't run, and then I'm going to listen to that.
And in the work that I've been doing since then, what's really interesting about you sharing that around the age of 10, 11, 12 is for most people, we have some kind of identity, not a crisis, but there's something that happens at that time. We do pin to, tends to be, there's something that quite big will happen in that age bracket.
Right.
That we then make some decisions based on who we are and who we're going to be in the world.
Right.
Fascinating.
So if we are easily influenced, too easily influenced, then someone else is shaping us, right? We're not shaping ourselves.
And it's our interpretation of that.
Yeah.
So even if they said something in jest or meant the opposite, it's not what they said, it's what you heard.
Mm.
And what you decided, because our brains are meaning making machines, that's how we have survived. So from that point, you made a decision. So how has that shaped?
Well, as you can see, I'm an
You?
athlete.
Yeah, obviously.
No, I actually did. I remember it. It changed my life, actually. It did, because I went from out of 110 kids on the cross country run, I'd come probably like 105th, 107th.
Yeah.
Within a year, I was coming in the top 10.
Dude.
Following year, I was playing rugby, and then went on to captain the first 15 of high school for 4 years. I was there, and was the fastest 100-meter sprinter in the school.
Check you out.
Proved him wrong. But why?
What are we
I don't know why.
Right?
I don't know why.
Like?
But it was like, you can't tell me I can't do something.
I still want to high five you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have to.
Come on.
I'll go on.
A little boom. You made that happen.
Well,
it's powerful stuff.
I don't know. Did I?
Well, who else did?
Well, did he sow that seed and I just watered it? Do you know what I mean? It's like, I think it's a dangerous kind of, there's a danger around this stuff, I think, that people say things to, in their view, maybe motivate you. But actually it seems hurtful at the time.
Yep.
But if we, like you're saying, if we perceive it the right way and interpret it the right way and process it the right way, it can actually be quite powerful for us. It can actually get us off our asses and we can go do something different.
Yeah.
I think about my youngest daughter. This has just come to mind now, actually. There's a kid at school who's just calling her names and stuff. And, talking about her body shape and stuff like that. She's changing at 11 years old, nearly 12.
Yeah.
And straight away, she's written a song about it, and she's now focused on her fitness.
Wow.
And I haven't said this to her, but it's not that you want people to go around telling your kids mean things, but actually sometimes it can be the catalyst for a positive change. But it comes down to your mindset and how you interpret that, right?
Absolutely
agree. You could have the opposite effect. You could actually, want to curl up and die in a corner or something and just roll over and be rolled over. So I think it's a dangerous kind of thing, a game to play. It's not, but I do think that depending on who you've got around you and your mindset, those little kind of moments can make a big difference.
And often do.
Yeah.
And that word that you use, the catalyst, that's key, right?
Yeah.
It's a catalyst for what?
Yeah. Well, that's what we decided.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not, when you say we decided, I mean, I spent a lot of time not knowing that I had a decision.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until even I got out of my radio career, so 14 years down the track of trying to prove Dick Ware wrong, and then going, uh, why have I chosen this career? That it actually makes me feel quite, and I loved it. Like 14 years of hanging out with amazing people,
Yeah.
interviewing, rugby stars and celebrities, and
Yeah.
this amazing opportunity, authors, both New Zealand and international stars, hanging out with great people, having fun. It was a hell of a career, but at the end of it, yeah, just it hadn't made me a better person.
Right.
In fact, it really hollowed me out because it was about being perceived as something. And again, this whole popularity contest,
Yeah.
that's what radio was for me from the late 90s into the early 2010s. 2012, I got out and
Right.
never went back.
So if we can then, right, can we go back to that radio career and learn a bit more from you about what that's like? I think that's important to share, and also what that journey was like, because you've kind of alluded to the ending, if you like, a bit of the radio career, which we need to come to and talk about. But maybe the context of what life was like in radio might be useful, and maybe I'm going to pile it all on. This is so I don't forget. See, old age, I'll forget this question.
As long as you come back to it,
I'll
because
try.
there's a good
I'll try.
chance.
Well, maybe you can remind me, and I'll remind you.
We'll do our best.
Between us, we'll get there.
Okay.
What I'm thinking is that, telling us about what life was like in radio, and the fame, pursuing the fame. I think that there might be some important lessons that come from that we can share. You can share. That might relate to. It's slightly different now. Everyone can be famous, or they think they can.
Yeah.
And actually, there's nothing stopping them. And it's probably a lot more accessible than what it used to be. That fame, that stardom, that airtime. But is it what they think it's going to be? Do you know what I mean? And so maybe if we could go back through your career, your radio career a little bit, and share in a bit more detail of what that was like, then we can find out what that led to for you, but there might be some correlation for others.
Sure. Yeah.
So
where do we start?
At the beginning. So you went from a copywriter to getting the 10 till 2 on air. And you were obviously good at it, right? You obviously had a talent for it.
I think I was rubbish at it. I think a lot of this was...
You think you're rubbish?
Thinking back, like it's...
But you had a career in it. You can't be that bad, surely.
Yeah, and that's the fascinating thing is you start thinking, and I spend a lot of time, and I'm mindful of not jumping to the end, but now that I've had to do so much healing, I know that it wasn't a strong start, shall we say that? But everyone's learning. I think was my enthusiasm and my zest, and maybe the what is it, spirited. Carly's a spirited child. She needs to learn to listen in class. Blah blah blah. What's the point in listening? And so I got that opportunity, but I think it was because they were looking for a young female, someone they could probably pay a certain amount, and get away with it.
Right.
An 18-year-old. And maybe I was the right person at the right time. Yeah. Yeah. It was cool though, because I think about it, I was 18, 19 when I was on the Kapiti Coast, and I got like, what is it called? It is a pseudonym, isn't it? Like when you kind of get another name.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A pseudonym. And so I ended up being called Carly on the Coast.
Right.
Yeah, that's funny. I forgot that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then got a bit of a name for myself, I guess, in terms of that environment. But it didn't take long before I was up for the next challenge. And so from doing 10 to 2, maybe did that for a year, then got a night show gig, at Star FM in Wanganui, which was awesome. And that would be, so I'd go in and do production engineering from 1 o'clock in the afternoon till 4 o'clock. And then I'd go home, have an hour for dinner, come back, be on air from 5:30. You had to be back at the station 5:30 and on air from 6 to midnight.
Right.
Every night. And then, yeah, so that was my life.
How long did you do that for?
I did that for 18 months and then got a bit of sick of that, and then went to Nelson. I got a gig doing what's called the drive show.
Mm.
So that's your breakfast shows are the big, that's meant to be your stars of it, or certainly in regional, because I was in regional radio, so not like
the breakfast show is it's the pinnacle, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. And at that point, you had regional breakfast shows, so you're well known locally in your region. Then the drive shows, that afternoon show, so that was when was that? 2 to 6, and I got that job in Nelson at what was Fifeshire FM, and these stations that I was with then became More FM stations.
Right.
Yeah. Then I went and did a stint overseas in Australia, and just the token Kiwi, like that's what you're called. They would not allowed on air because that horrible accent that you've got. And I was thinking, I was pretty much told the same thing about, actually it would be the death of my radio career in New Zealand if I got an Australian twang. That's what I was told.
Is that right?
Before leaving. Yeah. And did some work at CFM and Gold FM over there, and just went, no, I'm going to try something else. And it ended up on my way to the UK. There was a job going in Tauranga at what was Coastline FM, and I ended up coming back home, dropping a whole lot of gear off at mum and dad's on my way to London, and never got to London.
Is that right?
No, because I got this job, and so then that was it.
So you were going to London, what, for like an OE?
Yeah, that was it. I was going to go and meet all my mates over there because I'd chased my career, and they were gallivanting around the world doing all sorts of cool stuff. Yeah. And I mean, I thought I was doing real cool stuff, and it felt like I was doing cool stuff. But then I got that job, and that was 2002. So I did breakfast radio from 2002.
What was that like?
It was amazing. Like, that really was the pinnacle of what I wanted to be doing in radio, in local radio. And then from there, I guess the next step was a metropolitan market, so either Wellington or Auckland, Christchurch, and do breakfast radio there. But actually, landing in Tauranga, I was went, this is a cool town, and didn't really want to.
So you were literally Carly on the coast.
Oh, again, right?
Again.
And my maiden name was Glenn, so Carly Glenn, which was amazing for radio because Carly Glenn at Star FM, Carly Glenn at More FM. So that that kind of worked. That worked really well.
Yeah. So, what's it like? I mean, you when you were describing before about sort of doing the production in the afternoon and then doing 6 till midnight, and obviously getting home late every night, and does that take its toll? I mean, it's what's it like doing radio? Is it really easy or is it really hard?
It's such an interesting question.
Yeah.
What's it like? I have nightmares now that I am on radio again. Isn't that crazy? People want to get on radio, but once you've been there, I'm like, no, couldn't think of anything worse. But that's when you've been there and done that, right? You don't want to go back there again. But it is, when you're doing shows on your own, it's just you've got to organise, right? Make things interesting, know your audience, know your music, know current events. So that was a criteria. when you're in radio, you have to know what's going on in the world. So you read your newspaper, you're on stuff all the time. You are on Radio New Zealand, you're learning about all sorts of events and reading magazines for pop culture. Like you have to be across it. And yeah, just the one thing I just had these stubborn moments when I just would fight the mainstream. And the one I think of was when Twilight came out.
Right.
Yeah, the Twilight movie series.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you had to, you were twihards. Like, do you remember the twihard
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
And so were you like Team Edward or Team,
Mm,
what's the other guy?
yeah. I don't know.
Jake. Anyway, and those types of things that I just went, no, I just don't want to, I don't find that entertaining at all until I got out of radio and then loved Twilight. So
Because you didn't have to.
because I didn't have to, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually the moment I got out of radio. The first thing I dropped is don't watch the news, didn't read newspapers, just didn't want to know, didn't want to be involved. It's as soon as you get into breakfast shows were fun because you've got another person there. You've got the anchor, which tends to be the male, and I was a co-host. And so you form pretty strong relationships, or you have to form a strong bond. So I was pretty lucky. I got to work with two in particular who became like best friends, like easy, fun. What are we going to do here? Let's riff, let's make this cool. But you have to, like, it's a second marriage type scenario too. And when you're already married and then have a second type of this person's been forced upon you and you're being forced upon them, you kind of have to get to know each other really well. And
Either works or it doesn't, right, I suppose.
really, and when it doesn't, it's hard. When it does work, it's awesome.
So have you experienced both?
Both. Yeah. Very much so.
So the one that didn't work then. Why was it hard? I mean, is it like a chemistry thing that like if you were use the word riffing and that's kind of bouncing off each other, right?
Yes, correct, yeah.
So I suppose if the chemistry's not there and you don't have that connection, that becomes really difficult, does it?
Yeah, or there's a rift, so riffing, but when there's a rift,
Oh yeah,
that maybe one of you sees something some way and then, or you have an argument that probably wasn't well communicated. And, when you can feel a bit hurt from your partner, then, it's the same type of thing when you now have someone that you didn't choose to make that work. That can be really challenging unless you've got some way of having open dialogue and cleaning that stuff up, which I certainly didn't. Had no idea. And people are trying to undercut you all the time because in radio and breakfast radio, it was all about ratings. So if you don't rate, you don't get a contract that's renewed. So talk about the ultimate popularity contest. Yeah.
So before we get to the reasons for, well, maybe this is part of the reason. I don't know. I was going to ask a question about. You touched on there about the male being the lead, the anchor.
Yeah.
Why was that then? Was that just a historical kind of thing, natural thing that just not going to have a questioned? What was the situation there?
Yeah, interesting. I think there were nationwide shows that I guess the females have been the more popular, but that was very rarely the case in the regions, in my experience. And that may have been different in some areas that I'm unaware of, but certainly the shows that I was involved in, the guy was the anchor, and maybe that was the time of it as well. Yeah.
And so you also kind of alluded to with the Twilight thing. How much of what you had to talk about, how much freedom scope did you have to be Carly? Or did you have to be a certain kind of persona that was for the market? Were you kind of told how to perform, or is it just turn up and do your thing?
Yeah, it started off with turn up and do your thing. And I think that was coming out of that mid 2000, you could still do a lot in radio that you didn't have to put past people. It was kind of like, as long as like the general manager of the station knew what you were doing and what it might cost him, then he was quite happy to let you go with it. And we used to get told any publicity is good publicity. So, the scope was wide there.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And included all sorts of stuff. Like you could get pretty nifty in those days. And it certainly got trimmer and trimmer, whoever owned the organisation.
Right.
What you could do, the scope got more narrow. So it was an interesting play because when you're employed or hired, it's like, hey, Carly, we want you to do this breakfast show because we love that you're this dynamic kind of young woman, and our target market is, so don't forget, because you are 22. So I was only 22 when I started out on breakfast radio, but our target market's 34 to 45. So, you kind of you're going to need to appeal to an older audience, a more mature audience. So bear that in mind. And by the way, if you're going to be with a man, one of you's got to have one view and the other one's got to have the opposite view. And so which one's kind of more like your personality or your role? I remember doing these whiteboarding sessions. That was, okay, so Carly, your character's this, and these are this is what we can talk about above the line, and then the below the line stuff can come up. That you're not 100% comfortable can come out on air, but maybe only sometimes. And so you create this kind of, which was smart, really, because then you knew what was on limits or off limits for the other person. But it was also crafted, very crafted. And so much so where I think one of the catalysts for me is, once I've been on breakfast radio for about 6 years, I remember having to ring my program director in the morning and say, okay, we're talking about, I think it was toilet paper was the topic. And because he'd have a discussion about this the previous day. And I had to ask and go, so what's my stance again? What am I talking about? What's my angle here? And I think that became more and more prevalent. Didn't matter what our topics were. I actually didn't know what my point of view was. And so then I actually lost sight of my point of view.
Right.
Yeah. A lot. And talking about having to heal some of those wounds, I think that's a lot of, and it's not about blame. It's certainly not blaming. This was my experience of the industry. It was really cool being a part of people's mornings. And when I was on radio seemed like it was a big deal because this was before no streaming, so there's nothing online. Websites were pretty like two-dimensional at that point. So we're talking, what are we talking here? We're talking mid-2000s, 2010, around there. And which doesn't seem that long ago, but technology has come so far. And so all you was a voice on the radio. This was even before. So no Spotify, no Pandora, none of that. Like, so people still listen to the radio for music and very much entertainment. And it was a joy to be a part of, like a real delight and privilege to be a part of people's mornings. And we'd get a lot of emails were used a lot, but we'd still get people writing letters to us and say, oh, we really love this song that you created, or we love this. And so, and we're still saying happy birthday to people in the mornings. And when you become a part of the community, and I was very involved in local charities, especially the Heart Kids, Heart Kids Bay of Plenty, and I just felt like I was a part of their world, and felt very connected to wanting to do the best that I can as my community, in the community, and using that, my voice, to be able to connect people or rally support, or doing superhero parades and things like this. Like that's cool, man. That was rad to be able to do that. And when I got married, and people sort of felt like they were a part of our wedding, and we had people show up to our wedding who were listeners.
It's all
Yeah, yeah, bit weird for Robbie, but
right.
yeah, someone who is quite private
Yeah,
definitely found
but
that.
not weird for you though, right?
Oh well, no, I guess it was just that was
Were
what
you
was
used to
above
it?
the line and what I was quite happy to share and
Yeah.
making people a part of that. And also that when you make people a part of something, then that's that whole popularity thing, and that's going to keep you in your job because if you rate well, you get re-signed. You know, your contract gets
Mm-hmm.
re-signed, and then you've got a bit more leverage. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So what? So
I didn't really
radio,
answer your
radio.
question. Did I?
No, you did. You did. But radio comes to an end when? What year was it when you left the radio station?
I got pregnant with my number two, my baby, and it was not a good, not a good pregnancy. So from the minute of having to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I felt ill, and being on air in the morning and putting that smile on when you actually know that you've got to have the rubbish bin quite close to you just in case
Mm.
you need it. That was quite challenging, and I wouldn't say I had an easy dynamic on air at that point either. That was quite a challenging partnership, and so it became
Was this still the breakfast?
yeah, still in
Yeah,
breakfast,
yeah.
but different partnerships. I've been
Right.
through 3 partnerships on one radio station and on breakfast shows, and then after I had Anika, our second daughter, well, our second child, who was our daughter, I then went to the other radio station. So I was asked to. I had left one station and got asked by what had been the dark side, the other, the, our competitors,
Ah,
yeah, to start and be part of their breakfast show.
right. And so you went there,
Yeah, I did.
but that didn't work out.
6 months, she was done. Yeah,
Okay.
no, then it was, and I loved it. It was great, and that was one of my favorite partnerships on air. But when the lifeblood has drained, and you just know it's the end of that season, and it was. I just went, oh, same stuff, different day. I'm out. I've actually got no passion for this anymore.
Right. I'd like to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors. I'm really pleased to announce that we have Sharp New Zealand as a sponsor. And it's great to have Sharp on board because as a customer, I can speak about their products and services from personal experience. And it feels good to be able to endorse and recommend a company because of the level of satisfaction we have regarding the services they provide. And across my businesses, we've certainly been impressed with the care and collaboration we've experienced in our dealings with Sharp. It's certainly a brand that we trust. Sharp has a long history of creating breakthrough products designed to meet the needs of people living in New Zealand. Sharp's leadership in technology innovation ensures it's at the forefront of the pack, providing business solutions from printing and photocopying to interactive meeting solutions and ICT phone systems. No matter where you are or what size your organisation, whether you're large or small, Sharp New Zealand can provide their services to you nationwide. If you're looking to upgrade your technology or renew your photocopier leases, talk to your local Sharp team or visit the website at sharp.net.nz. That's an important lesson too, right? Because if you're not enjoying it, if you're not passionate about what you do, and I don't think I'm saying this, I don't think it matters because I'm not a personality. I haven't been on radio or TV or anything like that, but I don't think it matters what job you do. When your passion goes out of it, that's the time to think about doing something different.
Well, something's not right, is it? And I think maybe for me, that's definitely a pattern of behaviour. But if I'm either 100% in and I'm charging,
Mm.
or if I'm even slightly out,
Yeah,
my ship's sailing. And I've got to, I always
yeah,
use that, I think, as my a navigator to go, I'm either in or
yeah.
I'm out.
It's not always. It doesn't always seem, I think, the easy option, though, does it? You know, when you've got kids, you've got a mortgage, you've got commitments
Oh, yeah.
to say, I'm not enjoying this job anymore, and I'm just just going to leave. But that change can be quite significant and actually quite stressful. And it's probably what keeps people in jobs, and maybe what is contributing to why, globally we've got sort of 70% of people who are unhappy or disengaged at work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a scary stat, isn't it?
It is huge, isn't it?
And as a business owner, like that's, yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I'd go back to, if I'm out, what am I in?
Mm.
Because if I'm out of this, what am I going to be in?
Right.
Because again, I've got to make that work.
Yeah.
And I think that tenacity, I'm not a very patient person. I've had to learn this, Steve. Learning patience. And someone said to me once, the reward for patience is patience.
That's annoying, isn't it? I mean, it's true, but it's not what you want to hear.
Unacceptable. Yeah.
It's like this is happening for a reason. It might be, but you don't want to hear it.
I don't get it. It's not.
Yeah.
That's not a reward.
No. So what was your next then? So obviously, I'm guessing from what you're saying, you didn't just leave and then think, I'll buy myself some time, think about what I want to do. You had something in mind, right?
Well, lucky Robbie he did the dream job, and was flying in, flying out of Australia.
Right.
So based in Tauranga, we're in Tauranga, and got 2 kids, both under school age, so not at school yet. And he'd left his job in Tauranga and was doing fly in, fly out. So 3 weeks he was away in Orange working at Cadia Mine, which is a gold mine. And then 2 weeks he was home. And I thought, oh, this is great, because he's going to be rolling in the money, like bringing in the money. So this is my opportunity to get out of radio, be a mum with the kids, and start my own job, my own business. And I went, right, what am I going to do? What skills have I got? I can talk. Oh, yeah, that's good. How do I make that into a business? And sure enough, public speaking, presentation training.
Yeah.
So I started my own business doing that. Meanwhile, expecting Robbie to be, when he was away, like making all this money, and Cadia Mine kaput.
Right.
Like the gold mine.
No gold.
I think mining.
Well, there's no gold there, isn't there?
Oh, I can't even remember the catalyst. I was I was destroyed because we were then in massive financial stress because I'd left my job, starting a new business, no clients, nothing. And suddenly we had no money coming in. It was pretty scary. Yeah, that was devastating. And so I think I kicked into, do I want to go back to radio, or am I going to make this work? And ended up making it work, and ended up getting some awesome clients, I think, based on credibility being in radio. And man, I had to learn how to train people to do what I've been doing for 14 years.
Right. So you knew how to do the doing, but you didn't necessarily have to train others to do the doing.
No, so I had to learn.
So that was a skill, obviously, like you said, you had, right? And it's not, I was kind of inferring that earlier about whether radio is easy or hard. I know that I've never been watching radio, but I know it'd be very hard. It's not as easy as it looks. Doing these podcasts is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Particularly with guests like you. No, I'm only joking.
I reckon. Tangents, bring them back.
So what I'm saying is, it's all right having a skill, but then what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Let's go teach. Well, actually, teaching is a different thing altogether than doing, isn't it?
Oh man.
But you've got there and you've been doing it for quite some time now, right?
Yes, I have. It was interesting because you don't know what you know until you have to teach what you know, and I had to actually figure out, how do you teach people to do what I do? And I got myself into so much trouble. Like I didn't know about this thing called intellectual property, and I didn't. You can't just take something of somebody else's and then. Yeah, so there was a few touchy moments.
Did you learn the hard way, by the way, or did you discover that along the way?
Yeah, I did.
That's some good advice.
I did. Oh, and Yeah, burnt some bridges, did some stupid stuff with just ignorance, naivety, and that's a hard pill to swallow. And you're going, well, you should know this stuff, but man, if you're anyone like me, I'm not necessarily a researcher, so I don't get energy from researching. I will learn by doing,
Mm.
and sometimes that really is punishing.
Mm.
Like, I've lost friendships because of silly decisions I made. I didn't consider the implications around until someone taught me how to do something. I went, great, I'll go and use that in my business. And without someone going, you can't actually use someone else's stuff, or you can't. Oh, I didn't know about a database of contacts. I know this sounds so simple. You should know this stuff, but when you've got to make something work, you just kind of like the blinkers. For me, the blinkers have gone on in different times of my life, and that can be dangerous when the blinkers go on. But without considering the impact or what could go wrong, that has had to be a learnt.
Mm.
I have had to learn and continually learn.
Yeah. Yeah. You triggered a thought there about the blinkers going on. Everyone talks about focus and how important focus is. But I think actually sometimes focus is not that great. Because when you focus on something, your peripherals go, right? You're not looking around to see what else is coming or what else you should be aware of.
So that has tripped me up many times. I'd say focus / intensity. I think my husband calls it being hell bent. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously lots of lessons along the way, but
Lots.
but where are you? Let's talk about where you are now, and you can give us the context of how you got there and what you're doing now.
So, oh wow, the journey there is from going from radio and starting out in business on my own to where I am now. What is that? So 10 years, that's a decade. I started out in doing the public speaking presentation training, realized that it's still one of those things that people hate to do, and realized I didn't know how to run a business. I'd been in media my career, so I didn't know how to run a business. And within a few months, I got involved in a women's professional business network, which was brilliant because you got all these women around you doing amazing things who are running businesses, and you just learn so much. And I got quite, again, focused, intense, swallowed up in that, and then had the opportunity to kind of put my business on the side and become the national sales manager for that. Happy days. Inherited a team of 7 regional managers, have never managed myself, let alone 7 women doing amazing things around the country, and had to learn about people leadership. I thought I was an awesome communicator coming out of radio, realized my communication had been one-way traffic because all you have to do is turn the microphone on, just make some funny stuff up, tell people what needs to be done, and turn your microphone off, communication done. And realized, why are people not doing what I've asked them to do? And just then being fascinated by how unique people are. And I had to learn to listen, other than just to my kids, but learning to listen far more than actually speaking. And that's where it was like a hit. It's this opportunity of personal growth and development and continuous improvement and wanting to be better at things for me became a real drug around, what do you mean I've got choice? Like, someone gives you feedback and you choose whether you're going to take it personally or not. Like, whoa, that blew my mind. Like, what do you mean? This was just, it was incredible to me. And then learning about growth mindset. What is this thing called growth mindset? And then you can frame things in a different way, which means you digest that information differently to when you are viewing things from a threat mindset, also known, the old fixed mindset, where everything's a threat. I felt like my life had been a threat, and suddenly, there's all this research and data and now experience that means I can do things differently and I can choose. That was incredibly empowering. I felt like that was, boom, the old, I'm going to do this part of my life differently.
Right. And are you doing this part of your life differently?
Every day I try to choose well. It's that choose wisely.
Yeah.
Choose wisely.
Yeah.
And so what am I doing now is through the 10 years of being a national sales manager and leading people to then realizing that you can improve, you talk about leadership and leadership skills. And that's something that you have to, what is that? There's so much to leadership. It's not a prescription, is there? Like there's things that we know work, but you've also got to do it in a way that's really authentic to you. So you got to start with basics. And that's what made me successful as a leader is I was hungry to learn, and it was more about helping people to get the best out of themselves. That's all I was doing, was facilitating what works for them to get the best result, right? It wasn't about me. It was about them.
Oh, you just summed up leadership there, haven't you, really? That is leadership.
I think so, yeah.
Continually learning.
Yeah.
Facilitating the success of others. What do they need to be at their best? That's it.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how many people don't see it that way. They say that leading is, you kind of telling people what to do, how to do it, having all the answers, knowing all the knowing.
Yeah.
It's not that, is it?
No, I don't think so. And I do get that. So now if I look back and I go, right, what am I credible in doing? Like what makes me go, hey, it's okay to stand out because I can be an expert in this. I've been there, done that. Now in my 40s, burnt bridges, but I have learnt and continue to learn. What can I do now? I do communications coaching. So that's what I do. I go into organizations and share those strategies and those tools and those techniques to understand who you are. Really pull back the layers on who you are behind that facade or the mask of whatever that looks like for you, professionalism, and but still being really authentic and bringing that. My hope is that, I guess, my purpose in life is tied to effective communication. Is what that does is helps you to be a catalyst for positive change.
So you talked about your purpose in life, right? And one of the things about life's work is legacy. What's your legacy now and in the future? What is it about that?
Yeah. I'd say I've got two prongs to my legacy.
Yeah. Two-pronged fork.
Two-pronged fork and probably many more than that. But if I whittled it down, life's work is what is my life's work would be using my talents, the things that I love to do that help others. So the contribution to others. And I think my world is communication. And why it's communication for me was the catalyst of I get to change. I get choice, and I can change how I view something. I can change how I respond to things, and that's a skill, right? My life changed when I realized that I actually had choice, and that choice comes through in how you are communicating, because you're always communicating. So if there was a gift that I could, like, part of my legacy is use my talents to help others create choice through the power of their communication. And the other is to my children. Our children are part of my legacy, and if I can support them to figure out they're awesome humans and what they love to do and what fires them up, and so that they can make a positive contribution to making life more awesome, then I think that's a pretty awesome legacy to leave as well.
It's interesting. I know why you did it. I know I said two-pronged, but actually it's the same thing, just two different audiences, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think my legacy connected to them, but whatever they decide to do with that, and then the choice, because that's not my choice.
No. No. But you know, like in work and in business, you are, you're trying to help others, facilitate the success of others through communication,
Yeah. Oh,
through
yeah.
understanding and communication, right? And so, but you're looking at doing the same with your children. How are you going to do that? Through communication,
Yeah.
leading by example. And like you say, what they do with it is entirely up to them. That's both in a business context and at home, isn't it? But you know, using your skill set to create the legacy for other people's legacies. What are they going to be? Who are they
Mm.
going to be?
How exciting is that?
Seems quite worthwhile, doesn't it?
Yeah, I care deeply about that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And being able to own your mistakes, right?
Mm.
Like, and just as long as you don't make them again.
Yeah. They're not failures if you're learning from them, right? They're just
No, and that's
great
an
opportunities
interesting.
to learn.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that the failure thing is, we're also so most of us are so afraid of failure. But if we could reframe that and just give things a whirl,
Mm.
and like considered, give them a whirl. That's amazing. Like the
Mm.
conditions of if we're going to save our planet, and we're going to have to think differently, so we're going to have to fail a few times before we get it right.
Yeah.
Before we make that change.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'm just gonna ask a question now about your parents and your mum. We were talking about the reverse psychology side of things. Where what's your mum's opinion of your career and where you're at now? Is she proud of what you've achieved?
Yeah, definitely. Mum and dad are, yeah, they're wickedly proud. I think they're proud because I and my brother as well are doing things that we love, with people that we love around us.
Mm.
So how's that for? I mean,
Yeah.
that's all I want for my kids as well, to be happy and
Mm.
healthy and do what you love
Yeah.
whilst making a contribution to the world.
Mm.
So yeah, no, mum and dad do say that they're pretty proud.
Yeah.
Yeah. She probably would have loved to have steered me away from radio.
Is that right?
Oh, well, and she never did. She was so proud of
Yeah.
go forth and do it. But yeah, having to, that's the whole thing, is that you share so much of yourself. Mum's
Is
quite
that okay? Yeah, I was
private
going to ask
person.
why would she steer you away from it? Was it because of that? Because you were basically living your life
Yeah.
in public,
Yeah.
airing your laundry type thing. Is that?
Yeah, and that's what made that's what made great ratings too. Like the deeper you could go, the more vulnerable you could be. The probably the more people would talk about you, the more people would then like you, the more people
More connected you are.
I don't know if you are like.
Well, people connect to you.
Yeah, maybe.
Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean, is that relative? I'm just thinking here about, why do the ratings go up? It's because people connect to
Yeah.
you, or they feel like they know you.
Yeah.
And I just got a sort of tiny thing of a seed in my brain there about relating that back to leadership again.
Mm.
We talk about leaders and connecting with people and facilitating their success. And it's all boils down to communication, right? Because if people don't feel that connection to a leader, if they're not connected, they're disconnected. I think some of the issues that we've come across in our work are down to a lack of vulnerability, being willing to be open, and you've talked about mistakes and errors, and being able to show that you're vulnerable. That affects the engagement and connectedness. And if you haven't got that, you haven't got the trust, you haven't got all sorts of other things, and that's maybe why the work relationships don't work quite so well.
Yeah, that's true. And I remember one of my regional managers once saying to me, and I was new to people management, but so enthusiastic, right? Like, you got to give me props for enthusiasm.
Mm.
And her name was Michelle, and she said to me, I just don't understand. I don't understand how you come across. Like, I think you're quite inauthentic. And that to me, I had to even ask her again, what do you mean? I don't understand. And I think because I'd say now, and this is before I'd done work understanding my own values, but being authentic and real and vulnerable is such a part of who I am. And when she called me on it and said, "You're so inauthentic," I just couldn't understand. But I had to ask her, and it was because I was so enthusiastic that she thought that was put on. And I said, "Oh no, this is actually this is who I am.
Yeah.
Like this is what you're seeing. This isn't fake. This is I'm enthusiastic. I'm cheering you on. I'm interested, genuinely interested. This is not a facade." But being called on that, like, I think you're so inauthentic. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
But that was because for her, authenticity looked so different. Her authentic nature was very different to my authentic nature. And so she didn't see me as authentic because it was so different to hers. And that blew me away. I was going, I can't assume that everyone knows that I'm sincere. I have to let people know that that's actually a part of who I am. That this is it. Like, I'm going to be your best cheerleader ever.
Yeah.
Sincerely. There will be no rug
Do you
pulling.
need to announce that though? I mean, should you need to announce that, or is that down to one individual's perception of it? I mean, like we don't know who this is and what was going on for that person, but for them to perceive that and then to actually confront you on it is quite something, right? It is confronting.
Well, I had to respect the fact that she was asking me.
Yeah.
But it did teach me a valuable lesson of, you can't assume, right? You can't assume that people know it. And again, it was the understanding that everyone is different. People are so vastly different. And so what I had to do was not come on in that intense, tenacious, that doesn't work for all people. And so it was, again, reading situations, reading people, listening rather than steamrolling and going, "You must love me." Look, that's fine. You don't. That's cool. But this is me. Like, yeah.
So if I was to ask you to give some advice to maybe the teenage Carly.
Yeah.
And you've got the benefit of hindsight now, right? You've had a great radio career. You've had a great business career. You've been in leadership roles. You've had some really good experiences and mistakes along the way. It's important to recognize that you said that, right? Because that's what we learn from, and you always learn. You've got that benefit of hindsight now. What would you tell teenage Carly to do differently, if anything?
Yeah, and I so much. I would tell her so much. But however, in saying that, if she didn't have all the foibles and nuances that she did, then she certainly wouldn't be where she is today. But let's just backtrack that and go, what I would say is, and she wouldn't understand it at that time, but do the inner work. Figure out what you like about yourself and then trust that. It was really interesting that this is okay to swing on a tangent, but I just had this amazing memory just come back to me. Is in my last year of high school at Nino College, where you'd have this evening where you'd go and meet the mayor, those that got a scholarship or high achievers. And we had blazers. We'd never had blazer, but we got given these blazers. I was like, "Whoa, we've got blazers. Love the blazer." I just even like saying the word. And we rocked up to this evening, shook the hand. It was Trevor Mallard at the time, and shook his hand. We were the high achievers of our high school, pretty awesome. And the lady said to my mum, she said, "Oh, is that your daughter?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, wow, she's so confident. She's got so much going for her. And Mum, in her mind, obviously she was all polite and said, "Oh, thank you very much." In her mind, she just said, "If only you knew how much she doubts herself."
Right.
Because so outwardly confident, inwardly pained, probably.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pained.
Pained. I just didn't like who I was for years. Years. So I guess radio was about proving something to someone about popularity and all that.
Was it proving something to you, or
Sorry, just my knees seized up.
is that from your 11K run yesterday?
Yeah, it is. So timely. What was the question, Steve?
Why are your knees creaking so loudly? No, it
Yeah.
was you were talking about being pained, and you said about trying to radio was about proving something to someone. Was it
Yeah.
about proving something to yourself?
Definitely.
What? Proving what?
I'm worth it. That old chestnut. And not knowing what worth it meant. And now putting some context around that. That's, you then have control over, or choice, not control, but choice over when that shows up. Yeah.
What was okay? What was going on for Carly that meant that you didn't think you were worth it, or had that self doubt? What was causing that?
Comparison's just lethal way. Like it's a dangerous thing, comparing yourself to others in terms of what you look like, how you respond, maybe your levels of intelligence, talents, what you're good at, what you're not good at. And that's what we do, right, to try and figure out where we're going with things. But yeah, I never measured up in my own mind, and that's something that is really important to work on early.
And that was kind of pre-social media, right?
That's pre-social media.
So I mean,
yeah.
you imagine maybe what kids are experiencing today.
Yep.
With what they see in the comparison, how they compare themselves to what they see online. Not just themselves, but what their families got, their house, the cars that mum and dad drive, you name it. How do we combat that?
Yeah, I think
because there's a real risk, isn't there, that you were obviously of the kind of character that would go out and prove something to others, but also to yourself.
Yeah.
But there's a real risk in society at the minute where we've got young people who probably don't feel worthwhile, and every time they're looking at their phone, which is pretty often, that's getting reinforced.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's dialogue again. I come back to this effective communication thing and dialogue with our young people, whether they're your children, whether they're other people's children. It's reinforcing that your uniquenesses, saw this awesome Ed Sheeran, what was it, like a keynote speech or something, and he just said, celebrate your weird. And I thought, no, that's cool. Like, and you talk to some kids now, and I'm quite happy to be unique and different. And in fact, I don't want to be a part of the crowd. And that's great messaging. So long as there's no suffering in it, like it's coming from a place of strength, not a place of suffering, whether it be internal suffering or, bringing other people down. But I just think the dialogue, again, that communication, the thing we do in our family is trying to equip our 15-year-old, son to talk about his emotions and feelings and using tools to kind of give him some vocab. And if that's how you're feeling, is that how you want to be feeling? And what's making you feel that way? So rather than me telling him how he's feeling, or sometimes a grunt, you just have to be okay with a grunt every now and then time it later. But the emotions is huge, huge. And so being able to talk about those and add some context and, hey, do you want to talk about that? No. Okay. and then ask again 3 minutes later, you know, like, but maybe get them at a more vulnerable time when they're lying in bed and like, hey,
Yeah.
you know.
I think it's so important though that even if you are, you know, I know from my experience, you ask those questions, and you know we're supposed to be good at asking questions, and wonder why when we ask a closed question we just get a no. Right?
No.
But you know that's just normal. But I think even just asking the question, not getting an answer or an open dialogue at that point in time, is still invaluable, because what you're letting that person know, or that your child know, is that you are there to talk to if there is something they want to talk about. And when they do, they'll talk to you in their time when they're ready, which is probably inconvenient for you, but you know, at least they know that, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to sometimes when you ask the same questions and you get the same answers, and there's no open dialogue, to stop asking. Never stop asking.
Yeah, well, that's tough, right? Because when you just keep getting the shutters come down, like that's especially when I'm, you know, my work is about helping people who want to be helped. My kids never asked. They don't pay for the coaching sessions, and they don't want the
You should
training.
point that out. They're getting them for free.
I do. I say, people pay me for this. I help sports stars and CEOs of organizations with communication, and you guys get it for free. And they're like, you know, unwanted. But it's just and lightening it up, like trying to making it so light, because we're real good at serious, and it doesn't have to be that serious. You know, even when it's serious topics, you can find a lighter side, and I think that brings them into dialoguing around it. And it doesn't actually matter if they're, I'm sure, you know, your kids, but if kids are asking you questions, answer their questions, you know, and ask them questions. And I think that's it. You know, that's a gift. That's something we can do with the comparison, is have them feel all right to be them.
Yeah.
And we won't always get it right, but we don't get necessarily just one go at it either. You know, it's that continual thing.
Yeah, that's cool. Carly, thank you for coming in today and talking to us. It's been great.
Thank you.
You're such a, I don't know how to describe you actually, just the energy. You know, when you were talking about someone earlier on questioning your authenticity, I don't know where they're coming from, because you couldn't act that way, right? You couldn't put it on. Your energy just comes out, and I do wonder where you get your energy from, and you must be taking it from somewhere else. But it's been great talking to you. I've got one last question.
Yeah.
And you've spoken to so many people over the years, like you said, the famous, infamous, and everyone in between on radio. But if there was one person for you, like, to nominate, that maybe they could come on Life's Work and you could hear about their life's work. And I'm not suggesting this because we're going to get them on here, but it's like if you could hear about somebody's life's work, who would it be and why? What would interest you?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question.
Thank you. I'll end on that note.
So one person.
Well, yeah, unless it's a
Oh, I wish you could
12
read that one as
pairing
a,
or something like that. You know what I mean? It's ABBA, you know, something like that. But you know, if it's an individual, that would be good, because it'd be easier to explain why you want to hear from them, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. There are so many. Who am I thinking of? Does it have to be like in New Zealander or
No, anyone, anywhere on any planet.
Yeah, funny. Do you know what and maybe it's because I have already heard this woman speak and I know a little bit about her life story, but in regards to having more people understand it and so talk about inspiring. But Ruby Tui. So Black Fern, Ruby Tui.
Okay.
She has got a book, a fantastic book. Look what they're doing with like the Black Ferns, just absolutely incredible. Very proud of our national women's rugby team and the culture they've created, the tenacity, the drive, the resilience. Yeah. In fact, any of the black ferns, I would say you should totally get all of them on at some stage. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Sorry for putting it on the spot. Thank you again for your energy and your enthusiasm and for taking time to come and talk to us. It's always really valuable. I always love talking to you. I go away with all sorts of ideas, thoughts, and energized from it. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thanks for asking the questions. I appreciate it. And for the opportunity, Steve. That's awesome.
No,
I love what you're doing.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
What a great interview I had with Carly Shorter. I always enjoy having a natter with Carly. Not only does she have deep insight into many areas that are of real interest to me, but her energy, enthusiasm, and humour are energizing and infectious. I always come away feeling a little bit better after being in her company. I'm sure you have similar people in your life who, seemingly without effort, can brighten your day and make you feel more positive. It's a reminder to us all to be grateful for those people, and maybe to also ask ourselves the question, how do we leave people feeling after our interactions with them? Anyway, Worsley's words of wisdom. At the end of every interview, I look back as part of the editing process and discover some of the gems that came out in the conversation and summarise them here. So, you'll recall that Carly said as she went through school and got older, she wanted to blend in more. She was worried about what people thought of her. Maybe this is a consequence of the culmination of our experiences and the way that we find our way in environments such as school. But what's wrong with standing out? Why do we feel the need to conform to social norms? Often the outcome is that we become boxed. I'm reminded of a song here called Boxes by Charlie Winston. It's a beautiful song. I'd recommend looking it up on Spotify. I think there are some real lessons in the lyrics of that song. To be honest, I think the younger generations of today have started to work this out. I know with my daughters, they seem to care less than I did at their age about what people think. So maybe those older ones could learn from them. Worrying about what others think is really constraining. I know I've found that over my life, and we all need to learn to care less about what people think about us. Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, is good for this if you haven't read it already. We only have so many fucks to give, so we need to use them wisely. I also remember Carly talked about people telling her she couldn't do something. Now, the opinions of others can either be motivating, as it was for Carly, or can cause us to be hurt and feel sorry for ourselves. And this depends on our mindset. As Carly put it, it's not what was said, it's what you heard. If we are more often than not negatively geared, we will interpret the words of others that way, often imagining what they meant and putting ourselves down in the process. When someone pays us a compliment, however, we can take it without too much thought, or we might question their motives. But when someone says something we interpret as negative, we make it all about us. Self-doubt appears immediately, and instead of questioning why that person sees the world the way that they do, we assume they're right and we look at ourselves. A bit like when Carly relayed the story of someone accusing her of being disingenuous because of her flamboyant style, when actually she was just in her element. Carly could have gone home and stewed on that, but she chose not to. The opinion of one person, a stranger in that case, can have such an impact on us if we let them. We cannot control what people say or why they say it, but we do have the opportunity to control how we choose to receive it and how we choose to feel about it. I also found it interesting that as a younger person, Carly was wanting to be in a role that provided the opportunity for fame. That was what was driving her. And yet later in life, when she had that, it wasn't so important. And I think this is an important point to raise. The things that people are prepared to do these days online to achieve fame and fortune may cause some distress later in life when inevitably such goals may be achieved but become less important. This doesn't just apply to being famous, of course. Any goal can take us to a place we believe is great or will be great, but turns out otherwise. Unfortunately, it's almost like we need to go through this process to discover it for ourselves. This is one area where others' wisdom is more often than not ignored, because nobody's going to listen to someone who seems to know what works best for them. And fair enough too. We need to establish what works for us. But remember, the process, the journey, that's where we learn and we create our own wisdom to apply to future goals. And as Albert Camus said, maybe it's not about a happy ending. Maybe it's about the story. So enjoy the creation of your story. Don't rush through it and don't miss the opportunities to learn. So I think I'll end on Carly's answer to the question about what she would say to the teenage version of herself now that she's become wiser. Carly said, do the inner work. Figure out what you like about yourself, then trust that. This is a powerful statement. There's work in here, of course, primarily because we can be hard on ourselves and not so willing to admit what we're good at. We spend too much time worrying about what we don't like about ourselves, which seems to be a human condition. And we do that instead of focusing on our positives, our strengths. And we all have them, of course. And if more of us did this, then maybe we could be less stressed, spend less time yearning for more. We could be more contented and lead happier lives. As Carly's t-shirt said, live your best life. I hope you enjoyed listening to Carly, as I did, and maybe, like I did, you learned something or had an insight into your own aspects of your own life, work, and legacy. Use it. Don't sit on it. Share it with others. Sharing is teaching, and it helps cement things in your own mind. It also helps you to commit to change, whether that's starting something new, just doing more or less of something, or simply stopping doing the things that are unhelpful to you. I wish you well for the future. I hope you're happy, safe, and successful in all that you do in life, including your work and your legacy. Remember, that's something you've got to consciously have control over. Live a life that's a story worth retelling. I'm Steve Worsley, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Life's Work, the podcast that's all about wisdom worth sharing.